The parshas that we're in these days, these weeks, as we know, are parshas discussing the Mishkan, the building of the Mishkan, what the Mishkan was used for. So the way the parshas sort of lay out is that last week, Parshas Truma was focused on the structure and the vessels contained in the structure, the actual Mishkan itself. And this week's parsha is dedicated to the big day Kahanim, the big day Kahuna, the clothing that the Kahanim would wear while they did their avodah. Now, those clothing, as it's described in the parsha, they're described as lakavid usifaris, like the pride and glory of the Kahanim. Not only were they beautiful clothing and necessary, but the truth is the Gemara even says a line, Bizman shebigdeim aleim kunasim aleim, that the true power of the kahuna, of being a Kohen, was fully expressed only when they wore the clothing. So the clothing was a big deal. And then after the parsha, after this week's parsha, and then it talks about how, the Jewish people followed through with the commands. They built the Mishkan, they built the they created the clothing, and then you have Sefer Vayikra, which is the next part of Chumash, which describes, okay, now that you have a Mishkan and you have the Kahanim, now what do you do? What do you do? The halachas of sacrifices, there's different types of sacrifices, different occasions to bring a sacrifice. That's Vayikra. The one thing that's inconsistent is that the way this parsha begins. The way this parsha begins is with the mitzvah of the Menorah. The Torah tells us, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, that you should prepare olive oil, take olives, crush it, prepare pure olive oil, in order to light the Menorah, that the Kahanim should light the Menorah every day, every night, in the Mishkan. And then it moves on to talk about the clothing of the Kahanim. Now this is out of place. Again, this is describing a particular part of the service that was done in the Mishkan. Where does this belong? In Vayikra, where it talks about the rest of the services done in the Mishkan. This parsha is dedicated to the clothing of the Kahanim. Why are you introducing that with talking about making olive oil, preparing for the Menorah? It doesn't seem to be consistent. Again, the way it should be. Last week's parsha, the structure. This week's parsha, the clothing. And then Vayikra, what to do when you, in the Mishkan, by people wearing the right clothing. And the Menorah is part of that. So what's the Menorah doing as an introduction over here? Okay, so this coming week is Purim Katan, right? Purim Katan is one of these, I guess it's called Purim Katan, like a minor holiday, right? The name is Small Purim. So when you think about Purim, certainly when you read the Megillah, the theme that jumps out at you when you actually read the story is life versus death. Right? Haman threatened to kill the Jewish people, it's death. And Baruch Hashem, the miracle of Purim was that we were saved and we remained alive. What's interesting is that the way we celebrate Purim is not so much, it's not like, maybe we should celebrate it by go to the cemetery and not die or something like that. What do we do on Purim? We have simcha, we have joy. So what is the connection exactly between, clearly there's a connection between life and death, and sadness and joy. The truth is, if you think about it, this goes back to the origins of where sort of Haman and his cohorts come from. The Gemara asks the question in Chulin, the Gemara says, Haman minatar minayin. Where's the first emergence of that negative energy that's called Haman, that wants to kill? So, and wants to bring death. The answer is Haman hates the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the whole story of the first sin, which brought death to the world. It's interesting, as a result of that sin, not only was there the consequence of death, that humanity is now mortal, but it also says, B'itzava teichlena, that sin brought death, and also brought sadness. Sadness equals death. Happiness equals life. In other words, it's an amazing thing, right? If you think about it, when a person is sad and depressed, they don't want to get out of bed, right? They just want to not do anything. It's a little bit of death. When a person is happy, all of a sudden they have energy and they want to move, they want to do something. Right? They all go together. So for example, Baruch Hashem, none of us should ever have to have a Haman or, you fill in the blank that's attacking, threatening your life. None of us, Baruch Hashem, should never have like a Kazakh or a Nazi, whatever it is, threatening our physical lives. But each and every one of us have a little Haman inside that does threaten our life in the sense that it tries to bring us down, tries to make us depressed. Depression and sadness, that is death. That's the gezer, that's the decree of Haman on a personal level. And therefore Purim, which is celebrating our victory over Haman, our victory over death, our survival, it therefore also means being happy. They're one and the same. So let's discuss a little bit some of the strategies that we can have, that we can use to overcome Haman, to defeat Haman, to be able to be happy and not to allow that voice inside to get us down. So it's like this. Usually the strategy, usually the strategy of Haman is to look at any accomplishment, to make you think, and to look at any accomplishment that you've done in your personal life, and to always try to find a flaw. That's usually what Haman does. In other words, there's a certain thing in your life that you want to be happy about, that you want to be proud about. Whatever accomplishment it is, you fill in the blank. What does Haman do in order to bring you down? Because Haman doesn't want you to be happy. Haman wants you to die emotionally too. So what does Haman do? What does the Yetzer Hara do? The Yetzer Hara always wants to make you focus on the flaw, right? It's not, a person is pessimistic like that. There's always like a flaw. Nothing's ever perfect. And what Haman wants to do is try to get you to focus on that negative flaw. That's what he wants to do. So what's the response? So the usual response is, well, don't focus on the negative flaws, right? Try to focus on the positive. Like you did a pretty good job. Yeah, so it's not perfect. It's not 100%. 90 is pretty good. 95 is pretty good. 65 is passing. You know what I mean? It's more good than bad. And the truth is, if you think about it, life is more good than bad. And so that's usually the usual antidote, or the usual response. The Yetzer Hara tries to get you to focus on the negative, so just fight against that and to try to focus on the positive. That could work to a certain extent, but it's not necessarily a long-term answer, because you're always in that struggle. You're never really undermining Haman's or the Yetzer Hara's general objective. The Yetzer Hara is always trying to get you to focus on the negative, so you're just not listening to that, focusing on the positive. But long term, you're always in that struggle. What's the real long term answer? So the Sfarim tell us, or Tzaddik HaKohen and Lublin talked about this. The long term answer, it's interesting, is to let him win. To let the Yetzer Hara win. To let Haman win. What does that mean? It means, what's the Yetzer Hara's objective? What's it trying to do? So you created this accomplishment, this big structure, whatever it is, in your life. And the Yetzer Hara is trying to break it down, right? The Yetzer Hara is trying to say, well, that's not perfect, and that's imperfect, and this could have done better, and you could have done better like this, and that guy down the block, his structure, so to speak, is nicer than yours. The Yetzer Hara wants to break it down to nothing, right? Let it do it. Let the Yetzer Hara do it sometimes, okay? And then there's another, not as magnificent structure. And then Haman goes to that one, and that's also flawed. And your relationships are flawed. And your relationship to God is flawed. And your mitzvahs are not great. You're not as smart as you think you are. There's other people that are better looking. And what Haman does, it starts breaking down everything in your life to the point of where it's completely all rubble. And now what are you left with? But here's the amazing trick. When Haman and his cohorts are able to demolish from a person's life everything that you've done to be proud of, then what are you left with? See, Haman thinks what you're going to be left with is nothing. But here's the great trick. What you're left with is what you can truly hang your hat on, which is the fact that you're alive and you're created by God. It's an amazing thing. Aaron HaKohen, let me explain this. Aaron HaKohen was the Kohen Gadol, right? The high priest. So it says in Pirkei Avos an amazing thing about Aaron. It says, Havi mitalmidav shel Aaron, that you should be a student of Aaron. Ayev shalom, raidev shalom. You should love peace, run after peace. Ayev esabrios, love people, umakarvan l'Torah, and bring them close to Judaism. So it's interesting. The Baal Tanya pointed this out. That line in the middle over there, loving people, that Aaron was he loved people, and he brought them close to God. It's interesting. It doesn't say Ayev Yisrael, to love the Jews, or Ayev es Adam, or to love people. The literal words are Ayev es Habrios, to love that which is created. So it's a funny language. Why that? Said the Baal Tanya because it means that's all it took for Aaron to love you. The fact that you were a creature, that you were created. That's all. Said the Baal Tanya, even if all you had going for you is that you were a Bir Yabalma, that you were just created, that's all that you have going for you. Said the Baal Tanya, that was enough for Aaron to love you. What does that mean? It means that there's an amazing thing. Chazal tell us that when Hashem Yisbarach decided to create the human being, going in the beginning, so the Malachim in heaven many of them were opposed to this idea. And their objection was, Ma enish kisis karenu. What does the human being do to be worthy of existing? What is this big accomplishment? So Hashem obviously didn't listen to them, and He created human being nevertheless. But a person has to know that anything that was said by the angels in that higher place, it's not just, it echoes, it reverberates down here as well. There are people going through life that in the back of their minds they hear that question of, what do I have to do to legitimize my existence? What is the human being? Why is he worth living? Because there are people that need to legitimize to themselves and to others why they deserve to be here. And see, this is the difference between Haman and Mordechai. If a person is starting with that assumption that I do not deserve to be here, and I have to legitimize my value, I have to legitimize my existence. And so how do I legitimize my existence? So I have to build up these structures, right? I have to do a lot of accomplishments, and well, then you have a big problem on your hands. Because if the stam, if the hanacha, if the assumption that you're building, if your foundation is, I am nothing, and I have nothing, and I have no inherent claim to exist, and my only claim, my only reason that I could point to legitimize myself are these structures that I build, my accomplishments, well then what Haman does is very simple. Haman says these structures are not enough to undo your basic assumption. Your basic assumption is that you're nothing. And so now, in order to undo that, your structure better be perfect. And Haman is always good at pointing out the flaws. And so the reason why a person, why is it that a person focuses on the negative and the positive? Why is that? What is the source of that pessimism? There could be many factors. One factor is because what is your status quo? If a person's status quo, if a person's assumption that you're building from, that you're working from is, I am nothing. That question of the angels, what is humanity worth to be here for? And the structure that you're building, your accomplishments in life, are coming to undo that assumption, well then those structures better be rock solid to undo something, right? Because if you have a certain assumption, to change that assumption, you have to be convinced of it thoroughly. What to uproot Haman is not to always but 50% is pretty good, 90% is pretty good. That's not. You're still acknowledging the assumption that Haman's making. You're still acknowledging that question. The true answer is that the very fact that we're alive means I don't have to legitimize myself to myself or to others. Brias ba'alma, all I am is a creation, and that's good enough. Not only is it good enough, Rav Tzadok says in truth, not only are we a creation, but we're also Jews. Rav Tzadok says there is nothing, this is a strong statement, there is nothing a person can ever accomplish, both physically or spiritually, Moshe Rabbeinu, there is nothing a person can accomplish, both physically and spiritually, that's greater than the very fact that you're alive, and specifically a Jew. What could be better than that? Everything that we do in life is icing on that cake. It's all just trying to express and to give nuance to the unbelievable thing that already is, which is that we're alive and well. We have to understand this. When the fact that we're alive right now, the fact that we're breathing, is not just like again, I've mentioned this, but why are we here? Not because we were once upon a time born 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. We're alive right now because the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to be alive. That means the Rebbeinu Shalom is focusing his attention on us. That's an unbelievable thing. There's nothing you can do in life to. What are you going to do to call his attention? I mean, so much so that he's willing you into existence. Brias Ba'alma, all you need to know is that you exist. That's all you need. Once you have that as a foundation, now all the edifices and all the structures, all the accomplishments you have in life, it's easy to focus on the positive. Because it's all icing on the cake. It's all icing on the cake. And what the essential connection, the essential worth that a person has is already there. It's already there. This is what's going on in the parsha. Let's explain the clothing of the Kohanim, right? The clothing of the Kohanim. See, in the Sar Makdashim, we have this idea that every parsha is not just telling us something that once upon a time happened or something once upon a time we had to do. It's telling us something right now. And each and every one of us, maybe we're not Kohanim, and we certainly are not living with the Beis HaMikdash. But each and every one of us, we're sent to this world in order to create for ourselves clothing which are honorable. In the Svarim we find that the term clothing is a parable or a mashal to everything that we do to express ourselves. That's what clothing are, right? Clothing are ways how a person identifies themselves and express themselves. That's what clothing are. So, for example, b'derech klal, generally speaking, the human being has 3 dimensions of expression: our thoughts, our words, and our actions. That's how you express yourself, to others, thoughts, words, and actions. Those are described by the Sforim as levushim, as clothing of the soul, or clothing of your humanity. That's the way you express yourself. Every thought that you have, it means that you're putting on a certain pair of clothing, in a certain sense. Every word that you say is a pair of clothing. You're expressing yourself in a particular way. The job of a Jew in this world is to develop for yourself clothing that are lechaved usefaris, that are splendorous and beautiful, and honorable and dignified. That's the job of a Jew, to go through life and to have good thoughts, to say good words, to do good things, and to amass a wardrobe of beautiful clothing. But here's the problem. If that's the objective, to have clothing that are coveted, honorable, and expensive, and glorified, what do you do about the Haman? The little moth that's in the closet, that all it's going to do is find a little extra thread that's coming out, or the button that's hanging off a little bit, and it's only a matter of time till he brings your mind to focus on that part of the clothing which is not l'kavod l'sifars, that's not splendorous and beautiful. So what do you do then? This is why the Torah introduces the subject of clothing with the mitzvah of preparing olive oil. Chazal tell us in the Medrash that the Jewish people are compared to olives. There are many psukim in Tanakh that describe the Jewish people as Hashem's olive orchard. There's a psukim like that. And so it's an amazing thing. What is olive oil? Olive oil is you take that olive, it looks pretty good. What do? You break it. And then you break it, you crush it even more. You turn it into pulp. And what are you left with? So you think you're left with nothing. It's not true. What you're left with is the core essence of what was in that olive, which in truth is greater than what you started with. That's what the Torah is telling us. You want to be a person that goes through life developing a wardrobe of really, really nice clothing? That's great. But you have to start with this first truth, which is that even after the moth undoes all that clothing and rips apart all your, all the structures, all your accomplishments in life, know that when you break it all down, what are you left with? A pure drop of oil. Oil that's able to give illumination, to give light, to give warmth. And so realize going in that when Haman is trying to dismantle everything, sometimes let him do it. Because ultimately what it all is going to reveal is that what are you left with is your basic humanity. And in truth, that's great. In truth, that's great. Because that's pure. That's pure. And there's nothing that anyone can ever do to take that away. This is why Rav Tzadok says when a person wants to be happy, if a person's joy is ultimately dependent on answering the question of what am I worth, that's a joy that's first of all dependent on something finite and specific, and therefore because of that it can't be forever, it can't be eternal. It's always going to go up and down. Because if I'm in a good day, in other words, if the source of my happiness is my clothing, for example, so to speak, then what happens in a day where I have a big blueberry stain on my shirt? What happens then? Well, then my simcha goes down. Then another day where it's doing pretty well, simcha goes up. The pasuk says that the purpose of the olive oil is to light the menorah lahalos ner tamid, for there to be an eternal, consistent light. That means the Torah is telling us the objective is you want to find a simcha, you want to find a source of being happy that's consistent and always present. The answer is, in order to do that, is that you have to dig down deep enough to find within yourself that nukuda of what Aaron would love about you. And Aaron wouldn't love you because of what you've done, or what you haven't done, or what you can do, what you're going to do. That's not why Aaron loved you. Aaron would love you because you're a birya b'alma, because you're created in God's image. That's all that it took. And when a person strengthens himself by that and realizing that everything, all the clothing is just to give expression to that. Like I said in the beginning, that the function of the clothing of the Kahanim is what? Bizman shebigdeim aleim kunasam aleim. They're Kahanim. So what do you need clothing for? The clothing express their natural kahuna. That's the same thing over here. You want to find simcha, you want to find joy, you want to undermine the very thought process of Haman. Let him break down your olive into nothing. But what you're going to be left with is that pure oil that's able to give a light that's consistent and steady throughout all the winds of the world. And that's the idea. That's what Simcha is. That's what Purim is about. As we prepare for Purim, Purim is the holiday where it's like Simcha, right? Simcha. It's also the holiday where we drink until we don't know what we're doing. The answer is that's the point, right? All of our accomplishments are based on our understanding, right? You have to be conscious to accomplish, right? So Purim is the day where we celebrate, where we have the greatest joy in the world, when we undermine the faculty that allows us to accomplish anything, because that's the point. Because true simcha comes from realizing that who I am and my self-worth is not dependent on what I do. When you boil it down, it's that little drop of oil that's able to create a lahalis ner tamid, to create a flame that's consistent forever, a simcha that's forever. And on that, now you can start talking about clothing. Now you can start talking about clothing. We should be zeicha to have that simcha, to mishnichnas adar marbim b'simcha. You know what I'm saying? To really, really connect to that point in us that doesn't have to legitimize to ourselves or to others why we're here and what we're here for. We should be zeicha to individually and collectively be zeicha to experience that simcha. Be as God tzedek, v'mher v'meinu amen.
Thank you, Hashem. Thank